I still remember the moment I first saw the Philippines from the plane window, the Emerald Islands scattered like jewels across the turquoise sea. I had traveled all over the world, from the snowy streets of Moscow to the gleaming skyline of Singapore, yet nothing had prepared me for this. My career in investment had taught me to look for opportunities where others saw risk. I had a reputation for turning overlooked regions into thriving markets, but even I had underestimated the Philippines. Landing in Manila, the city greeted me with chaos and charm all at once. Horns blared, jeepneys weaved like dancers, and yet there was a rhythm to it, a pulse that told me this place had life, ambition, and hidden potential. My first instinct as an investor was to look past the surface, to see the numbers, the land, the resources, the people who could make this country thrive if given the right guidance. I walked along the crowded streets of Makati, past small sari-sari stores and towering condos, and I kept thinking about the global comparisons I had always held in my mind. Switzerland has no sea, yet it became wealthy through precision and innovation. Singapore has no farmland, yet it turned every inch of land into a machine of commerce and tech. Japan isn't rich in minerals, but it became a global leader through discipline, resilience, and ingenuity. Saudi Arabia may be a desert, yet it transformed sand into skyscrapers and megacities. The Netherlands may be flat or below sea level, yet it mastered water itself. And here I was, standing in a country with everything. Fertile land, abundant seas, rich minerals, geothermal energy, wind, water, and unmatched beauty. And yet the systems to fully harness it were missing. I met with a local businessman the day after my arrival. He was in his 50s, dressed in a simple barong, yet there was a spark in his eyes that spoke of ambition restrained by circumstance. You see, he said, we have everything, but we fall behind. Typhoons, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions. Life here tests you every day. We adapt, yes, but the system isn't in our favor. I listened carefully, nodding, but inside I was calculating. Where others saw obstacles, I saw leverage. The Philippines' rich seas weren't just fishing grounds. They were untapped routes for logistics, aquaculture, and export potential. Its fertile lands weren't just for local crops. They could feed entire regions with smart infrastructure. Minerals, energy, and beauty weren't just natural resources. They were assets waiting for strategic vision. I felt a rush of excitement that I hadn't felt in years. The next few days were a whirlwind. I visited Palawan and saw untouched beaches and dense forests. I sailed along Bakwit Bay, watching fishermen in their small boats, understanding that this wasn't just a country of tourists. It was a country of potential. I met engineers working on small-scale renewable projects, wind turbines, hydroelectric plants, solar arrays, and realized that with the right investment, these could scale to a national level. I even spoke with local students and entrepreneurs, young men and women brimming with talent but lacking mentorship and access to capital. Every conversation deepened my conviction. The Philippines was not poor. It was underutilized. Mismanaged, yes, but not lacking in capacity. One evening, as the sun dipped into the sea, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, I reflected on my life in Europe. Moscow had its icy winters, its elegance and order, but also rigidity and competition that often stifled creativity. Switzerland offered stability, but it was cold, controlled, and risk-averse. Singapore dazzled with efficiency, yet it lacked the raw, organic charm I was witnessing here. In the Philippines, every obstacle, the heat, the typhoons, the bureaucracy, was a potential advantage if approached with insight. I realized then that my role wasn't just as an investor, but as a bridge between possibility and execution. The very next morning, I visited a small coastal town in Cebu. I watched as fishermen repaired nets, children ran along the docks, and women sold freshly caught fish in makeshift markets. It struck me that here life was raw, honest, and resilient. Typhoons came, yes, but they adapted. Their spirit reminded me of Japan's recovery from earthquakes, the Netherlands' fight against the sea. Nature had tempered them, and yet they had not lost their ingenuity. All they needed was structure, strategy, and vision. I met with a local cooperative of fishermen. They had little more than their boats and determination, yet the energy in the room was infectious. I explained the concept of cooperative investment, sustainable fisheries, and export markets. Their eyes widened at the possibilities. For them, my proposals were abstract. For me, they were real, tangible, and scalable. I realized that opportunity didn't always come from new inventions. Often, it was in unlocking the value already there. The Philippines had everything. What it lacked was the system, the roadmap, the execution. Driving back through the lush countryside, I marveled at the contrast between urban Manila and rural Cebu. Fertile fields stretched to the horizon, dotted with small villages where life moved at its own pace. I thought of Japan, which had transformed disaster-prone land into innovation hubs, of the Netherlands mastering water and Singapore mastering density. Why couldn't the Philippines do the same? The answer was clear. It could, but it required leadership that was visionary, decisive, and unafraid to challenge norms. I spent the following week meeting with government officials, local entrepreneurs, and community leaders. I learned about the challenges: red tape, corruption, short-sighted governance. Yet beneath all of it, there was brilliance. Engineers with solutions, farmers with expertise, students with creativity. The Philippines wasn't poor. It was promising. It wasn't failing. It was waiting. My mind raced with possibilities. Renewable energy networks, tech-enabled agriculture, ecotourism integrated with conservation, export hubs for seafood and minerals. Each project was a microcosm of what the nation could become. In the evenings, I walked along the shore, letting the waves calm my thoughts. I reflected on my career. I had invested in cities, in tech hubs, in countries that were already primed for success. This, however, was different. Here, I could shape a trajectory. I could create a blueprint not just for profit, but for transformation. And that's when I knew the Philippines wasn't just an opportunity, it was a calling. By the end of my first month, I had drafted my initial investment strategy. I combined local partnerships with structured capital, technological implementation with grassroots engagement. I had seen firsthand that the problem wasn't the land or the people. It was the system. And if I could help build that system, not only would the Philippines flourish, but the returns, financial, social, and personal, would be extraordinary. On my last evening in Manila before moving to Cebu to start implementing my plans, I stood on the balcony of my rented apartment, looking out over the city. The sun dipped behind skyscrapers, and the lights of the city began to sparkle like a mirror of the stars above. I whispered to myself, almost in awe, this is where the next story of growth will be written. Not just for me, but for everyone willing to see the value where others only saw risk. I thought of the nations that had overcome their limitations: Switzerland, Singapore, Japan, Saudi Arabia, the Netherlands. Each had one thing in common: vision applied to opportunity. The Philippines had opportunity. I had vision. The question was simple: could we together transform potential into reality? I smiled, knowing that my journey had only begun, that the first chapter of this story was about understanding, learning, and seeing clearly what others overlooked. And for the first time in years, I felt the kind of excitement that only comes with discovering a gold mine where everyone else saw rubble. I arrived in Cebu with a suitcase full of plans and a mind full of optimism. Manila had shown me the pulse of the city, but it was here in the provinces that I would see the true heartbeat of the Philippines. I rented a small office above a bakery near the port. It wasn't glamorous, but it had a view of the sea, and I could see fishermen unloading their catch every morning. That, to me, was the first reminder. Every challenge here came with a solution, if only you looked carefully enough. The first weeks were humbling. I had envisioned a smooth rollout of sustainable projects, renewable energy networks, modernized fisheries, tech-enabled agriculture. I imagined meetings flowing seamlessly, permits being granted on time, local staff eager to implement innovative solutions. Reality, however, had its own way of testing me. Permits took weeks, sometimes months. Corruption lingered in subtle forms, fees that slipped through the cracks, approvals that required connections I didn't yet have. At first, I was frustrated. My European mindset demanded efficiency, accountability, and deadlines. But the longer I stayed, the more I realized that the system wasn't broken because of laziness. It was a survival mechanism. Bureaucracy had grown as a response to centuries of inefficiency, and navigating it required patience, relationships, and trust, not just money or authority. I remember my first field visit to a remote fishing village in Bantayan. I arrived in a small banca, bouncing along choppy waters under a scorching sun. The fishermen were skeptical of my presence at first. Who was this blonde woman with foreign ideas, and why should we listen to her? I introduced myself not as an investor, but as a learner, someone willing to understand their way of life before trying to improve it. And that changed everything. They showed me how they measured tides and wind patterns, how they rotated fishing spots to prevent overfishing, how they had informal systems of cooperation passed down from generation to generation. Their knowledge was intimate, precise, and adaptive. I had thought technology would be the key, but here, centuries of experience had already created a blueprint that just needed structure, support, and scale. I began implementing my first small projects. We introduced solar-powered lights on the dock so fishermen could safely work at night. We installed sensors in the water to monitor fish populations and prevent depletion. I partnered with local engineers to build cold storage facilities that extended the life of the catch, allowing them to sell to distant markets at higher prices. Each initiative came with challenges. Wiring in a remote village without consistent electricity tested our patience. Maintenance of sensors required constant training, and convincing villagers to adopt unfamiliar methods required trust, empathy, and demonstration rather than instruction. The more I worked, the more I realized the Philippines' secret strength: its people. Across the country, in cities and villages, I found ingenuity in unexpected places. A woman in Davao had designed a rainwater collection system from discarded barrels. A teenager in Iloilo built a drone out of scrap materials to monitor farmland. In every corner, I encountered creative problem-solving born from necessity. These were not isolated instances. They were evidence of a nation brimming with untapped talent. My role was to connect these sparks, to provide resources, training, and networks. Yet challenges were relentless. Typhoons hit unexpectedly. I watched as months of work on a small aquaculture project were destroyed by a storm. Roads washed out, electricity went down, and entire villages were stranded. But I also watched resilience at work. Villagers repaired nets, rebuilt structures, and improvised solutions within days. I realized that where other nations might panic or wait for external help, the Filipino spirit adapted and persevered. Disaster wasn't just a threat. It was a forge for ingenuity and communal action. I also learned about the importance of storytelling and perception. Investors and partners in Europe often asked me, why not a safer country? Why the Philippines? I would respond with stories. The ingenuity of Bantayan fishermen, the creativity of Manila street vendors turning discarded items into business, the sheer energy and adaptability of youth pursuing innovation despite resource constraints. These stories didn't just illustrate opportunity. They proved that the real value of the Philippines lay in its people, not just its land or seas. I began expanding. Renewable energy projects moved from pilot villages to small towns. We partnered with tech startups in Cebu and Davao to digitize agricultural processes, improving yields and reducing waste. We created platforms for local artisans to sell globally, connecting creativity with market access. Every success required patience, negotiation, and learning from failures. I realized that the Philippine system might appear chaotic to outsiders, but beneath it lay layers of practical, experiential intelligence that, when understood, could accelerate progress in ways formal structures never could. One day, during a visit to a geothermal plant in Leyte, I met an engineer who reminded me why I had chosen this path. She was a petite woman in her 20s, working amidst pipes and turbines that harness the Earth's heat. "We have resources that most countries can only dream of," she said, her voice steady despite the roar of machinery. "But no one taught us how to maximize them for our benefit. We need vision, not just equipment." Her words resonated. I was not here to take control. I was here to provide vision, mentorship, and strategy to amplify what was already present. And then came the turning point. A typhoon, stronger than any forecast, hit the Visayas. Roads were blocked, electricity failed, and communication lines were down. Many investors would have fled. I stayed. I coordinated relief, using local knowledge and technology to track resources and deploy aid efficiently. I watched as communities came together, sharing supplies, repairing damage, and supporting one another with remarkable discipline. I realized something fundamental. Resilience here wasn't theoretical. It was practiced every day. The Philippines didn't just survive adversity, it transformed adversity into innovation. By the end of that season, the first tangible results of our efforts were visible. Fish yields increased, farmers reported higher profits, and renewable energy projects stabilized small communities. But more importantly, I had forged relationships that transcended transactions. I was no longer an outsider looking in. I was a collaborator, a partner, a witness to the ingenuity and heart of a nation often underestimated by the world. As I flew back to Manila to report progress to my international partners, I reflected on how much I had learned. Opportunity was everywhere, in the land, in the resources, and most importantly, in the people. But opportunity alone was not enough. Systems had to be built, trust had to be nurtured, and culture had to be understood. The Philippines had everything. It lacked only structure and vision, and I realized that these were things an outsider could help catalyze without taking over. That night, I looked over Manila Bay, the lights of the city reflecting on the water. I thought about the future, a future where local ingenuity met strategic investment, where disaster bred resilience, and where the Philippines' natural wealth was matched by human ingenuity. My excitement was no longer just professional. It was personal. I had discovered not just a market, but a movement, one defined by creativity, courage, and community. The morning sun in Cebu was different from anywhere I had ever seen. It didn't just illuminate the land, it seemed to awaken it. I stood on a small pier, watching the boats glide over the shimmering water, each vessel carrying not only fish, but also a renewed sense of purpose. In the months since my arrival, the changes had been gradual, almost imperceptible at first, but now the results were undeniable. Communities were thriving, and the Philippines' potential, long overlooked by outsiders, was finally coming into focus. The small fishing villages that had once greeted me with suspicion now welcomed me as a partner. They showed me their nets, now mended and optimized with new techniques we had implemented together. The cold storage facilities we had built were full, allowing them to export high-quality seafood to Manila and even abroad. I watched children learning in schools we had helped equip with solar panels and internet access, their eyes bright with curiosity and ambition. Here, progress was not just numbers on a spreadsheet. It was a living, breathing phenomenon. I traveled to Palawan next, visiting farms that had adopted technology to improve crop yields. Drones mapped fields, sensors measured soil moisture, and mobile apps connected farmers directly to markets. The land, once underutilized despite its fertility, was producing more than anyone had imagined. Yet it wasn't just about technology or money. It was about trust, collaboration, and empowerment. The farmers weren't just beneficiaries, they were co-creators. Every innovation was filtered through their local knowledge and experience. In Manila, I met with young entrepreneurs who were using the platforms we had built to sell local crafts and artisanal products globally. The streets that once seemed chaotic were now buzzing with opportunity. Small businesses thrived, and digital connectivity created bridges to international markets. I realized that the Philippines' greatest asset wasn't its land or its resources alone. It was its people, creative, resilient, and endlessly adaptable. One evening, I took a quiet walk along Manila Bay, reflecting on the journey so far. The country had transformed in ways I could see, but more importantly, the mindset of the people had begun to shift. Where once there was resignation to bureaucracy and disaster, now there was initiative and innovation. Communities were not waiting for external solutions. They were participating in building their own future. I thought of the nations I had studied and admired: Switzerland, Singapore, Japan, Saudi Arabia, the Netherlands, and realized that the Philippines had all the raw materials they had and more. What it needed was sustained vision and systemic support. It struck me that wealth is not just measured in GDP or exports. It is measured in capacity, the ability of people to innovate, to adapt, to create, and to endure. In every village I visited, in every classroom, in every market and port, I saw evidence of this capacity, and it was limitless. The typhoons, the earthquakes, the volcanic eruptions. These were not obstacles to success, but tests of resilience. The communities had already passed them for centuries. Now they needed the infrastructure, strategy, and investment to convert that resilience into sustainable growth. I thought back to my first days in Manila, to the chaos that had seemed overwhelming. Now, after months of collaboration, mentorship, and patient guidance, that chaos had transformed into a rhythm, a pattern of innovation and progress. I remembered the engineer and lady who had said, "We have resources that most countries can only dream of, but no one taught us how to maximize them." She was right. And now, step by step, we had begun teaching ourselves. The transformations extended beyond economics. Community health programs, powered by local NGOs and technological tools, reduced disease and improved quality of life. Renewable energy projects not only powered homes but also created new jobs. Students trained in technology, agriculture, and entrepreneurship were now stepping confidently into leadership roles. The Philippines was awakening to the fact that its future was not a matter of luck, but of choice and action. I flew to Mindanao to see a wind energy project we had launched in collaboration with local engineers. Standing among turbines that stretched toward the sky, I felt a profound sense of pride. The turbines not only provided electricity, but also symbolized a philosophy, harnessing natural resources responsibly, creatively, and sustainably. In every spinning blade, I saw a metaphor for the country itself: resilient, adaptive, and ready to rise. By the time I returned to Manila for a final assessment, I understood something essential. The Philippines is not poor. It is not lacking in resources or talent. It is rich beyond measure, blessed by nature and endowed with people who, given the right tools and vision, can achieve extraordinary things. What it lacked was systemic governance and sustained leadership. That was not a flaw of the people, but a challenge waiting for solutions. I sat on my balcony overlooking the city, feeling the warm night breeze. Lights shimmered on the water, traffic hummed below, and somewhere, laughter echoed from a nearby street. I realized that wealth is not just about money or infrastructure. It is about confidence, creativity, and trust. The Philippines had all of that, in abundance. My role as an investor was no longer to see opportunity alone. It was to help the people see it for themselves, to amplify it, and to provide the frameworks that would allow it to flourish sustainably. I closed my notebook, reflecting on a journey that had started with curiosity and caution, and had grown into something far deeper, a partnership between vision and human ingenuity. I thought of every fisherman, farmer, engineer, and student I had met, and I felt a certainty that I had never known in any other country. The Philippines could thrive, and it would, because the potential was limitless, and the people were extraordinary. As the first stars appeared above Manila Bay, I whispered to myself, not as a foreign investor, but as someone who had come to understand, to witness, and to believe. This country does not need pity. It does not need outsiders to rescue it. It needs systems, vision, and courage, all of which it already possesses in abundance. The Philippines is not poor. It is waiting to awaken fully, and I was privileged to be part of the first steps of that awakening. And in that quiet, shimmering night, I realized the truth that had guided me from Moscow to Manila, from theory to reality. Opportunity is not measured by what is visible. It is measured by the courage to see what others overlook, by the patience to build where others abandon, and by the belief that greatness exists, even where others see only challenge. The Philippines had greatness. I had seen it, nurtured it, and I knew, with the right vision and the unwavering spirit of its people, it would shine.